So first and most important question, where are you going to put it?
Well, I'll probably put it in my office. You know, I like to fish, so I may change it from Showrunner Award to World's Biggest Fish Caught, but
Nice.
it'll go in the office.
Well, it's got some company because you have 31 Emmy nominations, 12 wins, a Hall of Fame Emmy Award, 4 Peabody Awards, and this, I love this stat, the first producer ever to take home Emmys for both comedy series and drama in the same year. I mean, come on.
If you stay at it long enough, so.
Slacker. So I was recently talking to one Peter Berg, and I'm going to share this quote. He wrote every episode of Chicago Hope, every word of every episode, 26 episodes. And he also had this show, Picket Fences, going 26 episodes. The guy was writing 2 scripts a week, and those were good scripts. Okay, this is not a very good Peter Berg impersonation, so bear with me. Anyway, he would write everything by hand. He would sit all day in his little office and just write. And I would talk to him about his writing process, and he just felt that the immediacy of ink to paper was the way for him to maintain that kind of aggressive output. And the other thing he did was he never came to set. He never talked to directors or actors.
Yeah, well, I didn't have time because we're
Clearly.
doing 2. I was younger then, and during Picket Fences in Chicago a bit real, and that was 22 episodes per season for both shows. So it was 44 scripts, and it was kind of madness. But fortunately, on that show, like what you saw here, I've been lucky enough to surround myself with really strong talent. And on that show, Chicago Hope, it didn't get as much notice as ER, because ER was the juggernaut that it was and deserved to be, but we had an extraordinary cast on that. And I remember one time, Mandy Patinkin, you mentioned me not coming to set, he came down to yell at me at how rude I was. And Mandy we got along well, and he was a terrific guy, but he exploded into my office one day and proceeded to lecture me, like Mandy can, about how rude I was, that these actors and crew members were working so hard, and I could not be bothered to even come to the set more than once or twice a month to say hello, and to look at the rudeness of you right now as I'm speaking to you. You cannot even be bothered to look up from your yellow page and meet me in the eye. And I looked up and I said, Mandy, I'm writing your scene for tomorrow. Tell me how you want me to handle this. He said, keep writing, and he left.
So this is my question for you. So you've written all these different kinds of shows. You've written comedy, drama, legal, medical dramas, adaptations. What's the secret formula? What's the DNA of a David E. Kelley show?
Well, there's no secret formula, and if you think that you've got one, or then it's easy, then that's when you've lost it, and you should get out. It's always hard and always daunting. I would say for my shows, they're character-based, and I look to mine the cauldron with a collection of characters that allow me to go in different directions. And so more times than not, you'll see kind of disenfranchised people who have flaws and personality deficits, but redeeming and something to love in them as well. I've always wanted, not always succeeded, but wanted the peace or to ultimately be affirming at the end of the day. That doesn't mean you don't have bad things going on within episodes, but at the end of the day, I would love to nurture the audience with the idea that people are more good than bad. And that's probably, if there's one common denominator that fits the bill across the board, that would probably be it.
Given that, what are some of the favorite characters that you've had across the shows that you've made? Who stands out for you?
It's really too many to mention, but you know, all the ones in Picket Fences were like family. The Ally McBeal and Peter McNichol, and they're probably part of me in both of those characters. Their sort of confusion at the way they looked at life and tried to navigate it. But I don't know that I have a favorite.
The last one you wrote.
James Spader's character in Boston Legal, that was a joy to write. I would throw as many words as I possibly could at him, and he would just elevate the page every single time. And when you work with actors who do that, I feel quite blessed. Big Little Lies, obviously, we had an incredible cast. This one, Presumed Innocent, one of the strongest ensembles I've ever had the pleasure of working with, top to bottom, starting with Jake Gyllenhaal and Bill Camp and Peter Sarsgaard, Ruth Negga. They just were all phenomenal.
So let's talk about your casting process. What do you look for in an actor?
First, I look for a good casting director, because you need one. There's something called casting fatigue. You've probably all heard of it, because it's a long, long process, and the longer it goes, the more likely that you will settle, that you'll hear an actor for, the first 20 actors will be so far off that number 21 will be remotely in the ballpark, and you go, that's the one. And that's dangerous. It's very dangerous. So I've always counted on a strong casting director to bring a point of view and a perspective to A, find the person that we're looking for, but B, be strong and secure enough to tell me that this person is not it if I fall for the wrong person. A woman named Judith Weiner cast The Practice and Ally McBeal, which we were kind of doing at the same time. And we did The Practice first, and then we went to cast Ally McBeal, and she changed the furniture around to cast it in the same room. And I said, Judith, I can see you've chose to sit over by the window this time. And she said, yes, so I can jump out of it if you fall prey to some of the inclinations that you did during the practice. So, and she was dogged. I mean, she found Callista, she found Dylan, and she was a ferocious casting director, as the best ones are. Jeannie Bacharach did Presumed Innocent. She also did a season of Ally with me. She's done The Bear. I mean, she's just fantastic. And when you get a casting director that does not settle, it just makes your job as a producer much, much easier.
Do you find that once you've worked with an actor before, you're able to then write with them? I mean, I guess over the long length of a continuing series, you can write to their developing character, but now you've worked with Nicole Kidman a few times. Do you have a better working relationship with her because of that?
You do. You get a sense. You first of all, you know their skill set, and you know their cadence, their nuances, and that you develop a shorthand over time. So that definitely helps. But you do that actually during the process the first time around too. It's a really good question, because I don't think people understand how collaborative a television series can be. I can't really compare it to movies because I've not done many of them, but in a series that when you're going on, you're really looking at what the actor is bringing to the piece and listening to it and feeding off of it. Seeing sometimes you're going for the strengths and shying away from the deficits when you're writing a subsequent episode, but oftentimes they're doing things that you don't even anticipate. And if you're working with great actors, you know, you just allow yourself to be flexible to play to their strength. O.T., who played De La Guardia in this one, I had no idea what he was doing when the dailies first came in. He was playing it with an affect and just sort of an aloofness and a humor, and it wasn't at all the way I'd heard it when I'd written it on the page. But it was great, and the show needed a little bit of levity where we could find it. So I remember second day of the day, I was going, I don't know what he is doing, but tell him to keep doing it.
So did you end up writing to that?
Then you do. Then you see what he has brought to it, the nuance and the delivery and the eccentricity that he brought to it. Okay, that's what we've got. That's the strength of this character. Let's write to it. It's folly to sort of say, well, that's not the construct that I set out to build, and I'm going to stick to the original idea. Sometimes you do, but other times, if you see what the actor is giving you is elevating the piece, don't be afraid of it.
Is that something you've learned over the course of your career?
I learned it probably pretty early from Stephen Bochco. Stephen Bochco, he taught
definitely
me,
deserves a round.
He taught me so many good habits, and he also had huge amount of respect for the actors, and you surround yourself with good people and smart people, and it's only going to make your work better. Lord knows we have more than a few in our industry who get threatened by others, so will maybe want to populate their piece with opinions who won't threaten their own. But he never did that. From the very first day I walked in his office, and he did that with the audience as well, said, don't ever for a second assume you're smarter than the audience. These people are more likely or are going to be every bit as intelligent as you, if not more so, and do not dumb your product down because that's where you think your constituency is about.
So let's talk about how you got your start. I mean, you started out as a lawyer, you wrote a spec script. How did you then end up on LA Law?
Yeah, I did. I was a practicing lawyer in Boston, and I knew I liked to write. I'd done a little bit in college, but it wasn't something I really thought I was going to make a living at. But my practice in Boston was, I was a young litigator, and it was motion practice for the most part, which motion practice means you go and you sit in a courtroom with a zillion other lawyers, and you wait for your case to get called. And you're nervous while waiting for the case to get called, but it's a long day in court with not much to do. And I started writing a script while in court, actually, and over the course of a year, at the end of that year, I had a script of a young lawyer who was bored with his practice because all he did was go and sit in motion session and never got to argue with.
How'd you ever come up with that idea?
I turned it into a script, and there was someone in our law firm who was getting into the movie production business from the producing side that I knew, and they were getting kind of bottom-of-the-barrel scripts, and he heard I was writing one, and he said, let me read it, and he read it, and by comparison, it looked good, and he optioned it. And once you get a script optioned, then you maybe have a chance of getting an agent or getting some attention. So that happened, and the script found its way to Stephen Bochco, who at that time was hatching LA Law, and he was looking for lawyers/writers, hybrids of people that could, because he really wanted the series to be as authentic as possible. So he invited me out, and I had no idea what a fluke it was. I watched Hill Street Blues, so I knew who he was, but I thought, well, that's kind of easy. You write a script and you go to have a meeting with Stephen Bochco.
Just go do that, guys. It's fine.
It was such a fluke, and I came out, met him, we got along quite well, and he gave me a script assignment, and it was, I remember the first couple of weeks were a bit strange because there was a writing staff of about 8 to 10 people, and all of us, couple of teams and a couple of us were individuals, we would get script assignments, and I had script number 8. So there were 7 that came before me. And I was noticing in some of the early story meetings, a window, I'd see people walking by with their belongings leaving the office, and I realized, oh, these are the writers who have turned in their scripts. And Stephen would weed them out pretty quickly. And now it came time for my script was due. And I turned it in, and I walked into the office and sat down. Fewer writers at this point because some had departed. And he looked across the table and he just said, "You can do this." And I remember, oh my God. It was like when when I'd taken the bar exam and opened the envelope and said that I'd passed the bar, that, oh wow, I'm not the complete fraud that I was convinced, I'd convinced myself that I was. But he said, "You can do this." And boy, when someone like Stephen Bochco says that, that can really fuel the tank.
That's really incredible. How did you come up with your ideas for stories? Were you writing for a particular character, or were you writing for specific kinds of cases?
For LA Law?
Yeah.
Well, the room we would, it was very different. There was LA Law and the rest of my career, because Stephen Bochco did his best work in a room with other writers. In fact, we had a small writer's room. He would think brilliantly. He would think even more brilliantly in this room. The more people,
Really?
the more the heightened his acuity would be. In fact, when he would write himself, and he could not break a story or solve an ending, he would call all the writers into the room to talk about it. We quickly realized he really wasn't calling us in to get our ideas. He was calling us in because he did his best thinking with an audience. And but the other thing he was so brilliant at is he was able to articulate story points for other writers to go off and hit the targets that he drew on the roadmap. And I could not do that at all. Where Stephen's process was, if he's stuck, bring everybody into the room. My process is, I can't really do my best work unless I get everybody out of the room, because I want to be in the room with the characters. It's probably a more schizophrenic way to work, but I immerse myself into the world. So in Picket Fences, I'm sitting around with Judge Bone and Fivish Finkel, who played Wamba, and Tom Skerritt. Those were the people who were in my writer's room. And same thing with Ally McBeal. They were at my table, Ally and Cage and Fish and so forth. Once I moved into the adaptation process, it changed a little bit because those characters were hatched and crafted in the book, and it was a hybrid. It was a morphing of both worlds. But I've always been more of a solitary writer. I've gotten better about working with staffs, and it's easier to share the load. But at the early part of my career, it was actually harder because I didn't really know what I wanted in some of the storytelling until I immersed in the world myself and got in the trench with the characters. So it's probably frustrating for I had many writers come in after I'd do a rewrite, and they would say, "Well, if you wanted to go left, why did you tell me to go right?" And my answer would invariably, I didn't know the right direction was left until I got inside the world and tried to mine it myself. It didn't make them happy to hear that explanation, but it was the best I could offer.
But that's almost the trend of where shows are going now, with writers writing their whole seasons themselves. I mean, you've clearly been doing it. Mike White's doing it on Lotus. There's so many examples now of just writers writing their whole seasons, which makes sense. It's a different creative process.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's any right or wrong way to do it, but I do think each individual, the writer has to listen to how he or she works best and be true to themselves.
For your career, obviously, your legal background set you up for shows like LA Law. How did you then immerse yourself into medical shows, into characters that you wouldn't have had that sort of educational background for?
Well, the medical show is brutal. I did 1 year of Chicago Hope, and the jargon and the research, I liked the character work on that, but the medical stuff was tough. And I left after, I think after 1 year of Chicago Hope, and turned that over to John Tinker and Bill D'Elia, who ran it quite well. John Tinker, I was a huge fan of John Tinker because he had done St. Elsewhere. And I had watched Hill Street Blues and St. Elsewhere. At the time was MTM Television, which was run by Grant Tinker. And life being cyclical as it was, when John was working on Chicago Hope, and then he also came to work on Practice, he brought his little son to the office and the stage, running around here and there. And his little son, who was about this high, is now 35 years old, a bit taller, and the president of my company, and he's really my boss, is Matt Tinker. So it can be a family business that way sometimes.
How do you get your head, though, into a character that is not you? Like Ally McBeal, obviously, single working woman is not David E. Kelley. So how do you find your way into a character like her?
I'm not really sure. That's probably the schizophrenia part. I sort of focus on who he or she is, and I kind of listen to that voice. My process in every series, in every episode of every series, is you listen to the story and you listen to the characters. And at the beginning, you are crafting the story and you're creating the characters, but at some point, the process, it doesn't completely flip because you're still writing, but the characters are telling me where they want to go, and the story is now becoming the boss and dictating which direction it should go in. So, again, it's such an inexact process, at least for me. Others are so better able to articulate their game plan. Stephen Bocho is one. John Wells is another. John Wells is an incredible teacher as well as a writer. I don't lay claim to being able to teach. I probably have confused the people that work for me more. I did teach a workshop, a course, one year, and I started off telling the students that I'm not sure this class should exist because I don't know that it's a craft you can really teach. First of all, it's so inexact. There's no right or wrong way. You have to listen to an ear. So I'm not sure that it's something that can be taught. And then at the end of the semester, one of the students says, I think I agree with you. This is not something that can be taught, at least not well.
But what have you learned from some of the people you've worked with? You mentioned you got some lessons from Stephen Bochco.
I got many lessons from Stephen Bochco. I probably learned from all the writers. It's a very collaborative, industry. Certainly that you need to have one voice in charge, otherwise it could be a mess. So I've always been a little bit dogmatic about that. Now, some of the lessons I've learned in the adaptation process is you want to work well with others, and but at some point the leadership has to count. But I've learned from other writers, other directors. Jean-Marc Vallée, who did the first season of Big Little Lies, we had the best time on that, and he taught me a lot. The scripts would come out, and he would come back. And James Spader is an actor. Also, we did a similar process. Starting with Jean-Marc, he would come back to me with the script and say, okay, here's what you're telling. This is the story you're telling with words and dialogue. Can I try to tell it with camera and lose some of these words? And I would say, well, show me what you, by all means, but show me. I was afraid that story points would get dropped, but he would take what he would call a camera pass and show camera movements, take some of the text and transfer it to subtext, and I learned a lot from that and loved it. And he was a genius. James Spader, with some of the closing arguments that I threw at him, he would, he said, can I change this line to that line? And I would say, no, because that's really going to pull a thread on the storyline, and this is the point we're going for. And if you say that, we're not going to get there from here. He said, okay, I see where you want me to go. Can you allow me to change a word here and there if we get there? And we would try it both ways.
And who
scripted,
won?
I would say I would use his version just as much as the original and scripted version. It would never be far off from the page, but when you get an athlete like that, a thoroughbred who can, you're silly not to let him run.
For sure. Do you prefer creating your own shows or adapting shows as you've been doing now?
I've loved both. I would say creating was the biggest high. In fact, I never really wanted to adapt because I thought, the process of writing is twofold. There's a huge intoxication when you come up with an idea, when you break an idea, and there's an adrenaline that comes with that. And that adrenaline applies the fuel when you set sail and you go and write it. And my fear of an adaptation process was, well, someone else has been the architect. The story breaking is done. The idea has been hatched. Now you're just kind of the contractor to execute it. And I thought, well, that's all the work, but without the high of breaking the story. The first one I tried was Big Little Lies, and I actually quite loved it because first of all, the book was great. The characters were so fun to write. The book was very internal. Characters were thinking things but not voicing them. So there was a great deal of challenge. Okay, how do we take what's going inside the characters' minds and convey them? So there was real hard work to be done there. There was original work to be done there. But I love the story that she brought. One of the dangers of series television, having to do things quickly on a timeline, and you get more experience at it, which is a good thing. But if you're not careful, you can allow yourself to get too facile, and you can fall back on things that you've done before. So they're just, those are your muscles. Those muscles work, so I'm going to use those muscles. The adaptation process occasioned me to go in directions that I might not otherwise have ventured into. So I did Mr. Mercedes, the Stephen King thing, and that was horror. I had never gone into the horror genre before. Been a huge Stephen King fan, but I said, okay, I'll try this, and went down that path, and there was a lot of discovery in it, and I ended up quite enjoying it. So at this point in my career, I've been lucky. I've worked with Stephen King, Leon Moriarty with Big Little Lies. Scott Turow has always been one of my favorites with Presumed Innocent. Tom Wolfe with The Man in Full. So that's pretty cool when you get these kinds of authors, that kind of talent, trusting you with their babies.
How much collaboration do you do with them?
Well, Tom Wolfe was unavailable.
Yeah, well, obviously.
Stephen King, I was probably the most daunted with Stephen King because, it's Stephen King. And there are things that he writes that logistically and from a production standpoint are going to be hard to do. So I knew I was going to have to make changes. And I thought, oh, man. He may make me a victim in his next book, but he blessed everything. He says he loved it. I think he even said that Mr. Mercedes was one of his favorite, because I knew he hated The Shining, and I loved that movie, and he hated it. So I said, oh man, he's going to be a tough critic, but he was great. And Scott Turow, same with Presumed Innocent. Again, I loved that book. I also loved the movie. The one reservation, I didn't have many reservations about jumping on it because that was like a toy I just wanted to play with for so many years, but I was daunted. This has been done well twice, in book form, in movie form, and I didn't want to be the one to screw it up. The series offered an opportunity to dig deeper into characters, especially the ancillary characters. So I was really excited about that opportunity, and it was the love for the characters that made me dive in. And Scott Turow, just again, he said, oh, okay. He understood the difference in the process. Okay, a book is a book, television a series. A television series is a series. It was my baby. It's your baby, and it was great.
How much creative freedom did he give you to change who the murderer is? Sorry, spoiler alert.
We didn't talk about it. We didn't really collaborate on the piece. I didn't send him scripts. Did send him cuts. He loved it. He didn't see it coming. And
did anyone see it coming?
No. We were pretty careful with the groundwork that we laid to make it pay off. You know, these kinds of endings, you want that big aha, but you don't want the audience to have to do too many gymnastics like, wait, what? How did they get from here? You want it very proximate. So it's a surprise, it's a shock, but it makes sense quickly thereafter. And I think we got that. It was a testament. Again, we had a real strong cauldron of actors that committed to their parts quite well.
Did you know where you were going to end it when you started it, or were you writing to the performances?
I didn't at the very beginning. I knew that it could be Barbara, but I also was open to the possibility that if it presented itself, that we could take a departure. By show 3, I think we had settled on I don't know if you've all seen the ending, so I'm not going to say it. So.
Sorry. It's really good. Watch it. But how much fun do you have playing with subverting audiences' expectations? To sort of like, okay, people may have read the book, people may have seen the movie. Did you enjoy sort of like throwing in a plot twist here and there?
It was a good question. That was a challenge. We knew that because the book was so successful, as was the movie, that people were going to know the ending. So it was incumbent upon us to declare, even with the storytelling in the first few episodes, that this was a series that was taking departures. Some of the characters were different, some of the scenes were different, so the story could be different too. So I think the audience by show 3 or 4 quickly realized we're not on safe turf here. Anything goes, and they could watch it with a fresh eye.
And there's going to be a second season?
There is going to be a second season, but not with this cast. It's going to exist as an anthology series. The themes of the show will still be in place. Presumed Innocent will be the title, psychological, mystery, court, thriller, themes of betrayal and infidelity and character stuff. All those elements will be in it, but it'll probably be kind of along the lines of True Detective, in a new story, blank page, new characters from the get-go.
And you work with another great partner in J.J. Abrams?
Yeah, I've known J.J. for a long time. We've always threatened to work together and never pulled it off. We finally did, and that was a lot of fun too. He's obviously an amazing talent, and we kind of worked. I was kind of in the trench, and he was up 30,000 feet, and he would swoop down with his perspective, and he's. And JJ, I don't know if you know, he does everything on it. He writes the music. I mean, he directs. He writes the script. I don't do any of those things. I feel like a slacker because all I do is write the words down. JJ does it all, but it was a lot of fun to work with him.
Do you enjoy the limited series format?
I do enjoy the limited series, but right now I'm beginning to miss series again. The limited series allows you to tell stories that by their very nature just don't have legs to run 3, 4, 5 years. So the storytelling opportunities in limited series are probably more vast. When it's series, you're building something that really needs to be sustainable for a longer period of time. So you need characters and a franchise that allows you to keep repopulating or refilling the pot with new story ideas. That's why you see so many, ongoing shows tend to be doctors, lawyers, police, because new stories come through their walls that allow for sustainable storytelling over multiple years. What I miss about series television is just, I tend to mourn characters when series are over. You live with them for a year or 2 years, and they become a little too real, and then when they're gone, it's sad, and Big Little I still miss them. But series television, you live with the characters for longer. Also, you're really building a community. And at this, in the practice Ally McBeal days in Boston, we had another show, Boston Public, at that time. We were all on one set stage, and we had a daycare, and the crew would cross-pollinate, and they had children, and now they've all grown up, and there was a real sense of community with the ongoing series, and I miss that a little bit. So,
would you ever go back to it?
Yeah, I am going back to it. I did go back to it a little bit with Lincoln Lawyer, although I really, after the pilot, turned that over. Ted Humphries really has been doing the heavy lifting on that. So I wasn't really part and parcel of that community because I had other projects going on at the same time. But I am looking to do less amount of projects and get back to maybe a series where it can go on for a long time, and maybe we can get that community that I missed back, because there was real currency in it.
I think audiences' appetites have changed. I mean, looking at the success of something like The Pit shows that there is appetite for that.
Well, there is that with the audience, and there's even more of an appetite with the companies and the studios, because what they've discovered, and it's what the writer's strike was a little bit about, is that these shows they're all startups. These limited series, even series, if it's on Netflix or Apple or Amazon, a series by their definition, maybe 3 years and out. It's not like the old legacy days where a show would run 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And what they've discovered in all these multitude of shows is that there's a huge expenditure in mounting them, building them, and then building up brand equity. And by the time they've built up brand equity, or starting to have it creep up, it's over. And they've got to invent a new show and start from scratch. So now the companies are saying, give us something that over time can build and stay with us. And this audience looks pretty young, but when I was a kid, MASH and Cheers, they were flops when they started. Seinfeld did not. But those shows built up over time because they had the time.
And patience.
And once that brand equity was in place, look what happened. Friends as well. Friends was a hit right off the bat, but the studios now are looking for shows that aren't going to be over and done with in 1, 2, or 3 years. And I think that's going to be good for the consumer, and I look forward to it as a writer too, because when you spend so much time working with these characters, they tend to become real, they tend to become like your family, and you want to hold on to them.
Is there
Not the Mr. Mercedes family. I was happy to say goodbye to them.
I was just going to say, is there anything in your library you would revisit?
Was
there anything in your library, like your library of shows that you would revisit? There's so much appetite for going back or reviving shows or doing reunions, or you're done?
I'm not a reboot kind of. I feel I've done that once, and I'm not opposed to someone else taking something I've done if they've got a new idea on it and going. But I feel that. I just kind of want to go forwards, not backwards, if I can.
And do you still write longhand?
I do, although my hand sort of runs out of gas now. There's a little scar tissue that's built up from squeezing
I would imagine
the
after
pen.
all those Chicago Hope and Picket Fences
It's
scripts.
left-handed too, so that means I'm pushing all day. It's not flowery pulling. I'm like pushing and printing, but I actually do believe that there is a hand-brain connection, because when I try to dictate or type, I can do it a little bit, but it's not, the brain doesn't fire as well as when I write with my hand.
Okay. You heard it here. All right, I want to give you all a chance to ask some questions. Go ahead. Do you mind standing up? Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So just to repeat the question.
Well, I'll answer the second one first. The question was twofold: process and developing characters, and then internship opportunities. We're actually a very small company, believe it or not. We're only like 5 or 6 people. And some people are shocked when they hear them. JJ has 80 people. Showrunner Rhimes has 90. I think Ryan Murphy has 80 or 90. We have like 5 or 6.
Wow.
Now the shows itself will build out when a show is hatched. As I said, it becomes a startup. So then you're casting your cast and your crew, and then it will build out to about 70 or 80. But our nerve center is only about 5 or 6 people. We may get a little bigger, so interns are not completely off the pale. We're not offering them yet. And in terms of the process, it's so inexact, and it changes for every writer, and it changes for any given writer, show to show. Case in point, I did the practice and Ally McBeal at the same time. The practice, you could outline the scripts, because it was fairly linear. The story points were, had some legal structure to it, so you could actually sit down and write an outline, and on paper, it would track what the plot was. Ally McBeal was completely different, whereas the practice with a beat sheet would probably look like this. Ally McBeal was sort of look like this, because you are mining an emotional theme or arc of the characters, and you would start with that, and it would get out like this, and then it would turn into just a mess. And then you would arrive you'd start where you began, and you'd see where you ended up, and then you would try to, okay, now let's break it into a beat sheet, scene by scene by scene. But the process was more like soup, and you're stirring it, tasting it. No, that's too quirky, that's too dramatic, that's too out there, not funny enough. But it was a real inexact process. And I always cite that one because so many writers think that there is a way to do it. And it's not that I disavow film schools, because they can help you learn the craft. But one of the reasons I said to this when I taught is I'm not sure it could be or should be taught is the fear that students would walk away with a particular way to do it. Some of the best shows I've seen recently, if you pitched me the idea, I would probably say, well, that'll never work. And we've had the best shows have been that way. You know, The Sopranos. I'm gonna pitch you a show about a guy who hits people over the head with an axe and then goes to therapy, and you're gonna love him. And right. Well, we did. In the hands of David Chase, we did. Queen's Gambit, if you told me that one, oh, she's going to play chess. Okay, what happens in the next? She's going to play more chess. What about the third episode? She's going to play chess again. Oh, yeah, good luck with that. Well, we loved it. We loved it. But both those instances, you had an author, you had a writer who knew what they were going for, and they felt it here. You know, Robert Frost is probably the best quote that I've ever heard about writing, which is, no tears for the writer, no tears for the reader, which really means if you don't feel it, then don't expect a constituency to. And there's probably too many times than should be in our business where a writer sits down and goes, okay, what's selling? What are people watching? Therefore, let me do that. And it's not that we haven't had shows succeed doing that way, but the best ones, the ones that I love, the writers usually will have in common that they were told 1,000,000 times that will never work. I was told it on Ally McBeal. When we did the pilot of Ally McBeal, the producer, the head of the studio, his name is Peter Roth, and he was a good friend of mine. I had done picket fences with him. He was a champion of mine, LA Law, and he pulled me aside and he said, okay, look, when you said you were going to do the show, I made a commitment that we'd put it on the fall. And I'll honor that commitment if you want me to, but as your friend, I am telling you, nobody's going to watch this show. If we put it on with all the other fall pilots, it's going to get lost in the glut. He says, it's not saying you made a bad show, but it's not going to make it. And I beg you, let me wait and put it on in the spring. And I probably would have listened to that, but I just gone through that with the practice. And the practice was put on mid-season, and nobody watched it mid-season. So I thought, no, if I'm gonna strike out, I'd rather strike out in the fall. And Peter, to his credit, said, okay, we'll put it on, and it worked. But you know, nobody can tell.
Yeah, you never know, especially now. Go ahead.
So, how do you feel knowing that your name attached to a project has influence that the viewer will watch it because your name is attached?
That's a good question. It was like, oh, how do I feel about my name being attached to a project, and whether or not viewers will watch because of that? It's actually something I'm struggling with a little bit right now because back in 20 years ago, when I you know, I was very hands-on in everything I did. So I could trust that the audience could trust that if my name was on it, then it, you know, it was from me. And some of those series are true today, but some of them are not. Some of them have branched out and good intentions, because I'd like to, you know, I talked about Stephen Bocho being a mentor to me. And before I get out of this business, I won't feel I've succeeded unless I've mentored someone else that can point to me and said, I never would have got there but for him. So I have ventured out with other projects that I've not really been in the trenches on and done a whole lot on. Some of them have been quite good, and some of them less so. So for the viewer, there can be confusion. How do you know? The way I'm trying to address that is, it used to be a show only had one executive producer. Now you get an executive producer title if you watch. I mean, it's completely meaningless. And the reason that shows that have gotten rid of all the credits is because there's so many producing credits at the top, and so it doesn't mean anything. So to see my name produced, it could mean that I walked by the set, or it could mean that I wrote it. If I wrote it, the credit is there. But in the old days, the executive producer credit used to come at the end of the episode. Then they stopped doing that, away with that, but now we're in the process of getting that back, because we have prevailed upon the companies to say it is in your interest to build brand by letting your viewers know who's doing it. Taylor Sheridan's doing on his show. So if you tune into Yellowstone, or you know he's done it because his name is right there at the beginning, his name is there at the end. You know if his name is on it, he's doing it, and that's good. And we should all be doing that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you all so much for coming. Unfortunately, we have to end it there. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, David, for all of your work and all of your fantastic shows.
Thank you, everybody.